People, heartless people, and they don't need to be out here doing this to people like this.
It was at a vigil Friday night.
That is a family standing outside a house in East Cleveland. Not a courtroom, not a vigil hall, a house. The house where police found the body of a 22-year-old woman named Alishah Pointer, folded into the basement of a burned-out shell on Savannah Avenue, and left there like she was nothing. She was not nothing. She was a caregiver, a twin, somebody's whole world. And what was done to her over the hours before she died is the kind of thing that makes you put your phone down and just sit for a second. Because it did not happen fast. It was not a robbery gone wrong or a fight that spilled over. It was slow. It was deliberate. And by the end of it, a group of people had made a choice, together, in that house, that a young woman who had done nothing to any of them did not deserve to walk back out.
She didn't deserve that. She didn't deserve that at all. And I hope every last one of y'all rot in hell.
Here is what makes this one land so hard. Alishah did not do anything. She was not in a feud. She was not hiding anyone. She was pulled into a war that had nothing to do with her, over a murder she knew nothing about, and made to pay for it with her life. On her birthday, she was kidnapped, driven from one location to another, held for a day, beaten for hours by a group of people demanding answers she did not have, and then shot in the basement of an abandoned home. 8 people would end up connected to it. 2 of them were mothers. One of them was a teenager who should have been finishing high school, and one of them was a man her own twin sister trusted like a brother. This is not a story about a monster. It is a story about a room full of ordinary people who decided, one small step at a time, to do a monstrous thing.
For information about a Cleveland homicide case, she was tortured and murdered.
Baby girl, I love you. God be with you. God got you in.
So how does a young woman who spent her days taking care of other people end up tortured and executed by strangers? How does a name, whispered in the wrong room by a frightened man, become a death sentence for someone who was never even there? That is the question this whole story turns on, and I promise you the answer is worse than random. It was planned. It was coordinated. Multiple people, multiple vehicles, multiple houses. And when it was finally dragged into the light, it took more than 4 years, a mistrial, and 3 separate jury trials before anyone was truly held to account. Stay with me, because you need the beginning to understand the end. You need to know who Alishah was before you can understand exactly what was stolen.
But first up, new developments in a story that our team has been following for more than 4 years. In 2021, Alishah Pointer was found dead in an East Cleveland home. Investigators later learned that she had been kidnapped and killed.
Today, 3 of the 6 people connected to this case were sentenced for their role in the crime.
This is the Crime Almanac, where we sit with the real cases, on the record, and with the people they left behind. If that is what brought you here, take a second now to subscribe. Before we go any further, it genuinely helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Now, let us go back to the beginning, to a girl who was born laughing, next to her other half. Alishah Pointer came into the world on November 5th, 1999, in Cleveland, Ohio. And she did not come alone. Minutes apart, her twin sister Aliyah was born beside her. 2 girls, 1 heartbeat between them. For 22 years they were inseparable. Same birthday, same face, the kind of private language only twins ever really speak. The family called Alishah by another name too, Tammy, and if you ask anyone who knew Tammy what she was like, they all reach for the same word: loving. She grew up in North Randall with her mother Erica, her twin, and her sisters, in a house that was loud and close and full. Her older sister would later tell a courtroom that she had spent 21 years protecting her younger siblings from every danger she could imagine. But not this one. This one she could not reach in time, and that is a weight she says she wakes up to every single morning now. Alishah had what her mother called a caregiver's heart, and she pointed it at the people who needed it most. She worked in nursing homes, sitting with the elderly, the ones whose own families sometimes forgot to come. She worked in daycare, watching over other people's children, keeping them safe. Her family said she even helped locate missing children, helped bring kids in danger back to safety when the moment called for it. Think about that for a second and hold on to it, because it is going to cut deeper later. A young woman whose instinct was to protect the vulnerable. At 22, she was building a future. She had enrolled in an information technology certification program. She kept journals, writing down her goals in her own handwriting, and she was days away from launching her own online clothing business. Everything was almost ready, and there was one more thing waiting just around the corner. Her twin Aliyah was 8 months pregnant. Alishah was going to be an aunt, and she was absolutely over the moon about it. She checked on her sister constantly. She shared in every bit of the excitement about the baby that was coming so soon. So that is the picture I need you to keep in your mind. The girl with the journals and the plans and the business about to open and the niece on the way. Kind, steady. The one who genuinely listened when you needed to talk. Her mother said Alishah saw goodness in everybody, even the worst people she ever met. Even in people who did not deserve a single ounce of it. Even, it turned out, in people who would one day betray her.
She was a very, very loving. I'm pretty sure she was loved by her community, loved by everybody. I don't really think she deserved what she got.
Loved by everybody. That is what the people on her street said about her. So now hold that, and let me take you somewhere else entirely. Because 3 days before Alishah's birthday, in a different Cleveland neighborhood, in a story she had absolutely no part in, another young life was about to end. And through a chain of grief and fear and cowardice that she never touched, that killing was going to reach all the way across the city, and it was going to find her. November 2nd, 2021, early afternoon, broad daylight, in Cleveland's Slavic Village neighborhood. A 19-year-old named Aminja Zion Shomo was shot and killed on Goodman Avenue. He was a father-to-be. The people who loved him said he had left the street life behind, that he had gone back to school and was focused on being a dad because his own child was on the way. And then, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, he was gone. His family was shattered, and they wanted answers. When they felt the police were not moving fast enough, some of the people around that family made a decision that would destroy far more lives than it ever avenged. They decided they would find the answers themselves. A relative of Aminjas, a man named Hakeem Ali Shomo, started asking the questions, looking for a name, gathering people who wanted revenge, friends and associates loyal to the family, the kind of loose group that forms fast when everyone is angry and grieving at the same time. And here is the danger in a group like that. There is no rule about evidence. There is no burden of proof. There is no defense attorney in the room. There is only the pressure to produce somebody to blame, and the terror of being the one who cannot. A name did surface, but it did not come from a witness. It did not come from a camera or a shred of proof. It came from a man with a gun pressed to his head, trying, in the worst moment of his life, to save it. His name was Nathaniel Polk, 22 years old, and here is the detail that turns your stomach. Aliyah, Alishah's twin, considered Nathaniel a friend. She called him brother. She trusted him completely. On November 4th, the group caught up with Nathaniel and got him into a vehicle, and they put a gun to his head, and they demanded that he tell them who killed Aminjas. Nathaniel did not have a real answer to give, so he gave them one anyway. He pointed them toward Alishah's ex-boyfriend, a man he happened to have his own problems with. He told them where that man could be found. And when the group went looking and could not find him, someone in that group made an even colder decision. If you cannot get to the man, get to the woman connected to him. Her Instagram was passed around. And just like that, Alishah Pointer, who had nothing to do with any of it, who was not even with that man anymore, became a piece of leverage. Late that same night, a group set out to take her. 4 of them climbed into a vehicle and drove toward East Cleveland. Portria Williams, Destiny Henderson, who was just 17, Nathaniel Polk, the man who had given the name, and Hakeem Ali Shomo. At least 2 of them armed. But they knew Alishah would never just climb into a stranger's car in the middle of the night. So before they went for her, they went and grabbed someone she would trust. Near Glenmont and Superior, they found 2 young women, and they forced them into their vehicles at gunpoint. The judge would later name them in open court. Turquoise and Miss Harris, 2 people who had done absolutely nothing wrong, snatched off the street with no explanation, no warning, just weapons and orders in the dark. One of them they let go. The other, a friend of Alishah's, they kept, because they needed her voice on the phone.
The chief tells us that the suspect kidnapped a resident in East Cleveland last week and forced her to lure Pointer out of a home.
The abducted party that was taken from East Cleveland was actually taken to North Randall, where she lured Miss Pointer out of the address from North Randall. She was subsequently transported to several different locations.
They drove that terrified young woman to Alishah's location in North Randall, and they forced her to make the call. They told her exactly what to say. Imagine that. A gun on you, and you are the bait, and the person on the other end of the line is your friend. She made the call. And Alishah, hearing a familiar voice, hearing a friend ask her to come out, did what any of us would do. She came outside. No fear. No reason on earth to be afraid. She walked up to the vehicle, and for one moment she saw someone she recognized, and everything looked normal. And then the doors locked. The masks came off, and she understood, far too late, what this really was. Her friend was forced to stay and watch what came next. A trauma that young woman will carry for the rest of her life. They drove Alishah to a home in East Cleveland that belonged to Portria Williams. And this is where the group grew. Inside the house, more people were waiting. Brittany Smith, 33 years old. Anthony Bryant, 18, a high school senior at Randall Park who was set to graduate that very December. Now there were 6 of them, standing around one 22-year-old woman, and they wanted answers she simply did not have. Where is the man who killed Aminjas? What do you know? Who are you protecting? And Alishah told them the truth, again and again and again. She did not know anything. She was not with that man anymore. She had no information about any murder, but they did not believe her. They were certain she was lying. So the questioning turned to shouting. The shouting turned to threats. And the threats turned into hands and fists and feet and objects. Stop for a moment on who these people actually were, because that is the part that should genuinely frighten you. Portria Williams, the woman whose house it was, in her 30s. Brittany Smith, a certified health coach. Anthony Bryant, 18 years old, a high school senior at Randall Park who was supposed to walk across a stage that December and graduate. Destiny Henderson, just 17. And Nathaniel Polk, a young man who had been grabbed leaving the plasma center where he worked. These were not hardened, faceless killers out of a movie. They were neighbors. Co-workers, a teenager, people with children and jobs and futures of their own. And that is exactly how something like this happens. Not because a group of monsters set out to do evil, but because a room full of ordinary, frightened, angry people talk themselves, one decision at a time, into the unthinkable. Hours passed, multiple people taking turns. Alishah begged them to stop. She begged them to believe her. She begged them to let her go home. And the whole time, the walls were closing in on the people in that room, because the longer it went, the more they had done, and the harder it became to imagine ever letting her leave. This is the part I am not going to dress up for drama, because the facts do not need it. The court itself, months later, would lay it out plainly, in the flat language of a sentencing hearing, and it is almost harder to hear it that way. Listen to how the judge described what these people did to Alishah Pointer.
Miss Pointer was kidnapped, tortured, taped, down her throat. Beaten. And then left after being shot in an abandoned house in East Cleveland.
A gun placed down her throat. Tape wrapped around her face, tape that would later be recovered with a fingerprint on it. A fingerprint that placed Brittany Smith right there in the middle of it. That is not an argument that got out of hand. That is torture, plain and deliberate. And once they had done it, a cold and simple logic took hold in that house. She had seen their faces. She knew their names. If they let her walk out that door, she would go straight to the police, and every last one of them would go to prison for what they had already done. And so, somewhere in those hours, they made the decision that turns a kidnapping into a murder. They decided that Alishah could not be allowed to live. And do not forget the 2 women they grabbed off the street just to get to Alishah. One of them was released. But the other, Alishah's friend, the one forced to make that phone call, was made to stay. She was made to witness what happened next, held there against her while inside somebody else's nightmare. Whatever the rest of her life looks like, she has to carry that. 2 more victims, in a case that already had more than enough. Their only crime was being nearby, being trusted, being useful to people who had stopped seeing other human beings as human. They moved her one final time, to that abandoned house near Savannah and Manhattan Avenue. A burned-out shell the entire neighborhood had walked past for years without ever really seeing it. Nathaniel Polk, the man who started it all with a name, had left at some point during the night, but 5 of them remained. They took Alishah down into the basement, and in that hollow, concrete space, prosecutors say Portria Williams and Anthony Bryant opened fire. Destiny Henderson, 17 years old, raised her own weapon to fire as well, but it malfunctioned. And then they walked out. They left Alishah's body there in the dark, among the trash and the debris and the ash from an old fire, and they got into their cars, and they drove away, and they went on with their nights. It was the 5th of November. It was her birthday. She and her twin should have been celebrating together. Instead, only one of them would ever see another one. And this is the part that will break your heart, because while all of that was happening, Aaliyah already knew. Twins know. Her other half would not just vanish on their birthday, would not ignore her calls and texts, would not leave her, 8 months pregnant and frightened, without a single word. So Aaliyah did the only thing she could do. She started posting. First came the plea. My twin sister was last seen with a friend and has not come home. Nodi's story makes sense. My sister is missing. This is not a joke. Please pray for her. I just want her to come back to me alive. And then, when the silence got louder and the days dragged on, she stopped asking softly. She started naming names. She wrote out exactly who she believed was involved, and one of those names was Nathaniel Polk, the man she had called a brother. She called out the people who had suddenly gone quiet, the ones scrubbing their pages and deleting their pictures, and she told them plainly, I see you, I am on all of you, and I will never stop asking. She wrote that she was pregnant, that these were people who knew where she lived, that she was scared, and that she was doing it anyway. A young woman about to give birth, sitting alone at a keyboard, doing the investigative work she was begging someone with a badge to do. She could not have known that by the time she typed those posts, the outcome had already been sealed inside Portria Williams' house. There was no bringing her sister back, but Aaliyah's refusal to be quiet, her willingness to say the names out loud, became part of the trail that would not let this case disappear. November 9th, 2:47 in the afternoon. East Cleveland police received an anonymous call about that abandoned property on Savannah Avenue. Someone said there was something inside that needed immediate attention. 2 officers went in carefully, because the flooring itself was unstable, barely holding their weight. The air was thick with mold and smoke, and underneath it, something worse. They found stairs leading down, and they went into the basement, and they raised their flashlights. and the beams caught what they had been dreading: a young woman partially hidden under debris. She had been there for days. There is a moment, on a scene like that, before the identification, before the certainty, when she is still just somebody's missing daughter. And the neighbors who gathered out on the street that afternoon asked the only question that mattered. Who is she?
We were hoping for a better outcome.
There's multiple players involved in this incident. We know who they are, and we're gonna arrest each and every one of them.
The scene filled fast after that. Crime scene investigators, the coroner's staff, detectives from multiple jurisdictions, FBI agents. Yellow tape went up around the whole property, and technicians worked the basement inch by inch, looking for shell casings, for fragments, for anything that could tell the story the walls could not. It took dental records and physical characteristics to be certain, but soon there was no doubt at all. This was Alishah Pointer, 22 years old, missing since the 4th, found on the 9th. The coroner would determine that she died of gunshot wounds, and the police chief, a man who had spent years in law enforcement seeing terrible things, said it was not the violence that set this case apart. It was the planning, the coordination between so many people. That was the thing that made it different from ordinary street crime. Piecing this together was its own enormous task. 8 people, multiple vehicles, multiple houses across 2 cities. Investigators had to reconstruct a night that its participants had every reason to lie about. But the evidence was there. That fingerprint on the tape put Brittany Smith in the room. Fingerprints in the basement placed others at the scene of the killing. Witnesses talked. And eventually, some of the people who had been inside that house decided that their best option was to tell the truth about everyone else. Bit by bit, the state built a case strong enough to hold not 1 defendant, but 6. A few weeks later, the family gathered again on that same street, and they watched the house itself come down. The abandoned home on Savannah Avenue, already condemned, was demolished into a pile of rubble while they stood there with pink balloons and shirts that carried Alishah's face, so that it could never again hold anyone's child, so that the last place she was ever alive would simply cease to exist. But even as that house fell, the case was far from closed. Because arrests had come quickly for some of them, but the man investigators believed had set the whole thing in motion was not in a cell. He was in the wind.
Arrests have been made in connection, but there is still one man who is wanted tonight. This is the man they're looking for, Hakeem Ali Shomo. There's a $5,000 reward being offered for information leading to his arrest.
Hakeem Ali Shomo, believed by police to be, in effect, the leader of the group, and now the most wanted man in Greater Cleveland. The reward climbed. The agency stacked up behind the search. This was no longer a local matter.
We begin with an update tonight on the search for suspects in the kidnapping and death of 22-year-old Alishah Pointer.
It is now an all-out manhunt for one of the suspects accused in her murder, and police say they will corner every area of Northeast Ohio to find him.
Hakeem Ali Shomo, who police say may be the leader of the group, remains on the loose. East Cleveland police say soon there will be an intensive manhunt for the 18-year-old with the help of the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Cleveland police. We are told there will be nowhere for him to hide.
There would be nowhere for him to hide. And in the end, there wasn't. Shomo was taken into custody, the final piece of a group that, all told, involved 8 people. 6 of them would be charged as adults. 2 teenage girls were processed separately. Through the juvenile system, their names never released. When you lay it all out, the scale of it is almost hard to hold. Mothers, teenagers, a high school senior weeks from graduation, and the man Aliyah had called a brother. Ordinary people, most of them with no history that would ever have predicted this, who had gathered in a house and, together, decided that Alishah's life was worth less than their own fear of getting caught. Now, the state of Ohio had the terrible job of proving all of it in court to a jury. And that turned out to be a long, grinding, 4-year road of its own. In November of 2021, all of the arrested defendants were brought before a judge and charged. Aggravated murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, charges that carry the possibility of life in prison. Bond was set at $2 million cash for each of them. In plain terms, that meant they were staying behind bars. Then came the long wait and the slow machinery of a complicated case. In December of 2022, more than a year after the crime, 2 of the defendants, Nathaniel Polk and Destiny Henderson, made a choice. They pleaded guilty to reduced charges, involuntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and conspiracy in exchange for their cooperation. They agreed to get on the stand and tell juries everything they had witnessed that night. Who did what? Who said what? Who pulled which trigger? For Alishah's family, those deals were a bitter kind of medicine. Yes, 2 people were admitting guilt, but they would serve less time than the ones who actually fired the shots. That is the ugly arithmetic prosecutors sometimes have to do, trading a lesser sentence for the testimony that convicts everyone else. When the defendants were first brought before a judge, the bond was set at $2 million each, and the judge walked every one of them, one by one, through the same set of rights. The right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, the reminder that a charge is not a conviction. It is a strange, procedural calm, that first hearing, all of it unfolding in flat courtroom language while a family sits somewhere behind them, gutted, and there were 2 more names the public would never fully learn. 2 teenage girls, handled quietly in the juvenile system, one of them just 17, later moved toward adult court. 8 lives tangled into one killing, and the machinery of the law grinding slowly through every single one. And then the case nearly came apart entirely. In the spring of 2023, the trial for the remaining defendants began, and within days, it collapsed into a mistrial over a court communication that had gone to the prosecutors but not to the defense. The judge stepped aside and recused himself, and the defense seized on it. They argued the entire case should be thrown out on double jeopardy grounds, that their clients could not be tried again. For a while, it genuinely looked like everything that happened to Alishah Pointer might vanish into a legal technicality, that the horror of that basement might never see a verdict at all, but the court refused to let it. A judge denied the motion to dismiss, ruling the mistrial had not been engineered to trap anyone, and that decision was upheld on appeal. The case survived, and then, one defendant at a time, it finally moved toward the reckoning. In October of 2025, Brittany Smith, the woman whose fingerprint was on the tape, pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and conspiracy. That same month, Anthony Bryant chose to fight. He took his case to a jury and let 12 strangers decide his fate. They needed less than a day. Guilty on every single count: aggravated murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, conspiracy. He showed no emotion at all when the verdict was read. Just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as the word landed.
He was Alishah Pointer's chief executioner, Judge. He used both guns at that scene.
The chief executioner. That is what the prosecutor called Anthony Bryant in open court, the man they say used both guns in that basement. And then, in November of 2025, the last one standing faced his own jury. Hakeem Ali Shomo. The evidence against him was damning. His fingerprints were found in that basement, right where Alishah's body was discovered. Witnesses put him at the torture house and named him as one of the shooters. His attorney fought hard, challenged the forensics, questioned the credibility of witnesses who had taken plea deals to save themselves. But fingerprints do not make mistakes about whose hands they came from.
In connection to the 2021 death of Alishah Pointer, Hakeem Ali Shomo was found guilty today of aggravated murder and conspiracy, along with several other charges. He was part of a group who back in November 2021 lured 21-year-old Pointer to a residence in East Cleveland, tortured and killed her. Hakeem Ali Shomo is scheduled to be sentenced.
Guilty, the final conviction in the case. 3 trials, 3 convictions, And with the 2 earlier plea deals, all 6 adults were now held to account. The only thing left was the arithmetic of the years. And when the sentencing hearings finally arrived in January of 2026, more than 4 years after Alishah died on her birthday, the judge made absolutely certain the record would show exactly why she was handing down the weight that she was. She traced the entire tragedy back to where it truly began, to one frightened man and one name handed over to save himself.
I can't emphasize how tragic these facts were in listening to them. And this case started with the actions of Nathaniel Polk. And Nathaniel Polk was involved with the kidnapping of Turquoise, of Miss Harris, which led to the kidnapping of Miss Pointer, who was tortured and brutalized for days and left in a basement amongst trash.
And then she delivered it. Hakeem Ali Shomo, the man police called the leader, life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus decades more stacked on top to be served consecutively. He will die behind those walls.
The court imposes a prison sentence at Lorraine Correctional Institution as to count 1. Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Anthony Bryant, the man the state called Alishah's chief executioner, the same. Life without the possibility of parole, plus years more on top. No freedom. No second chances. Brittany Smith, whose fingerprint sat on that tape, life in prison, with no chance to even ask for release until she has served more than 40 years. She will be an old woman before a parole board so much as looks at her file. 2 days later, the final 3 stood for sentencing. Portria Williams, whose house it was, who provided the room where the torture happened, and whom prosecutors named as one of the shooters, life in prison, eligible to ask for parole only after 23 years. Nathaniel Polk, the man who set the entire thing in motion by throwing out Alishah's name to save his own skin, 23 to 28 years. And Destiny Henderson, just 17 when she raised a gun in that basement, 25 to 30 years, every one of them held to account. And with each sentence, the judge said it again, so no one in that room could pretend not to understand. And here is the ache that never quite goes away for a family like Alishah's. The 2 people who cooperated, who took deals and testified, will serve less time than the ones who actually pulled the triggers. It is how the system works, how prosecutors turn one defendant against another to convict them all. But try explaining that math to a mother. Alishah's family said the defendants told some truths on that stand, and still told so many lies, leaving them with questions that may never be answered. Even with 6 convictions, even with the sentences read out loud, there are things about her last hours that only the people in that basement will ever really know.
I can't emphasize enough the torture that Ms. Pointer experienced by these individuals in addition to others.
But sentences are numbers. They are not the loss. The loss lived in the people who had to stand up in that courtroom after 4 years of waiting and try to put into words a hole that will never, ever close. Alishah's family finally got to speak. Her mother, Erica, her twin, Aaliyah, the people who loved her the most in the world, given a few minutes each to say what 4 years of grief and silence had built up inside of them. They spoke about a girl who should have been turning 22 surrounded by love, and instead spent her last hours surrounded by strangers who wanted her dead.
In court, we never got the chance to tell her happy birthday, the day they joyfully brutalized and murdered. What's inside of these monsters cannot be rehabilitated. They are incapable of feeling empathy and remorse, and I beg this court to not show them any mercy and hand down the strictest sentence.
Alishah's mother told the court she lost 20 pounds after her daughter was killed, that her hair fell out, that when Mother's Day came around, she did not feel she deserved to be honored as a mother, because a mother is supposed to protect her children, and she could not protect Alishah from this. She said 2 of the women who took her daughter's life were mothers themselves. How, she asked, could you bring a life into this world and then take my daughter's? She said no amount of time would ever be enough. That time does not heal, that grief does not end. And Aliyah, the twin, the one who searched while her sister lay in that basement, stood up and described what losing her other half had actually done to her. The panic attacks. The nights she wakes up unable to breathe, feeling like she is dying. She has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. She said that when she looks at her own children now, she sees Alishah, and that one day she will have to sit them down and explain who their aunt was and why she is gone. And Aliyah has to carry all of it into a future her sister will never see. She has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. She has panic attacks and nights where she wakes up feeling like she cannot breathe. She said that in public, at work, people recognize her, they know what happened, and it makes her afraid, because she does not know who out there is connected to the people who did this. She is raising children now who will only ever know their Aunt Tammy as a photograph and a story. One day she will have to sit them down and explain who Alishah was and why she is gone. That conversation is out there in her future, waiting for her, and she says the weight of it never really lifts. And then, one by one, the people responsible got their own turn to speak. Some of them cried. Some of them carried a Bible and asked for forgiveness. And you can believe whatever you want to believe about remorse that only shows up once the cell door is finally in sight. But listen to what they actually said. Because their own words tell you something important. They knew. They always knew exactly what they had done.
I wasn't thinking. Emotions were running high from the death of my loved one in Midwest. One thing led to another and things tumbled out of control. It could have went. It never had to go as far as it did. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. No, I'm not the shooter nor the kidnapper, but I still share responsibility. My silence, not speaking up, cost Alishah her life.
My silence cost Alishah her life. That is what Brittany Smith said. Not the shooter, not the one who pulled Alishah into the car, but the one who stood there and stayed quiet and let it happen. And from the youngest of them, Destiny Henderson, 17 years old when she raised a gun in that basement, an apology aimed straight at the sister who survived, and at a birthday that will never be the same again. So what do we do with a story like this one? I think we refuse to let it become just another headline that scrolls by. Alishah Pointer was killed over a name handed to the wrong people in a moment of fear, with no proof behind it at all. She was never involved in anything. She was a young woman with a caregiver's heart who got treated as a bargaining chip in someone else's grief. And it should make every one of us think hard about how fast a rumor can travel, how quickly fear and anger can harden into something monstrous, and how many people have to say yes or simply stay silent for a thing this evil to happen. Her mother said she is stuck in time now. That to her, Alishah is still 21, still here, frozen on the last birthday they never got to celebrate.
For that, I deserve to spend every day I had to in prison. If the death penalty was an option, I would suggest it for myself because that's how much I hate myself for my involvement. Directly speaking to the twin sister, I'm eternally sorry. It's pain I feel every November 5th. The thought of you having to celebrate your birthday on the day your sister died tears me apart. I think about it all the time. I'm sorry, and I wish I did way more to prevent this. I'm sorry, y'all.
Every November 5th, for the rest of her life, is a day Aliyah now has to survive. A birthday that used to belong to both of them, now hers to carry alone. So let me leave you with her, and not with them. Alishah Pointer was 22 years old. A twin, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a caregiver who spent her short life looking after the people who could not look after themselves, from the elderly in their final years to children who needed someone to keep them safe. She kept journals full of plans. She had a business about to open. She had a niece on the way that she never got to hold. She saw good in people, her mother said, even in the worst of them, even in the ones who would one day betray her. That was Tammy. That is who she was. And that is who 6 people, and 2 more the system handled quietly, decided they had the right to throw away, on the one single day in the year that should have been all about her. To Alishah's mother, to Aaliyah, and to everyone who loved her, our deepest condolences. Rest in peace, Alishah Pointer. 1999 to 2021. 22 years. I tell these stories because I believe that paying attention is its own small act of respect. That refusing to look away is one of the few things we can still offer the people who were failed. If a story like this one stays with you, if you find any value in the work we do here, take a moment to subscribe so that the next case finds you too. This has been the Crime Almanac. Real cases. On the record, and I will see you in the next one.